Hi, I'm Danitza. I vlog sometimes. It's been a very long time since my last vlog. I was on medical leave, and you'd think that would give me a lot of time to do it, but I was so sick and so tired that I could not. But I just put a new post on Medium, and I figured, why not turn it into a video, you know? So I've been watching a lot of stuff on YouTube about personal finance, the financial diet, and Nate O'Brien, and other people who I'm not recalling at the moment. I'm a disaster with money. I was not raised in a household where we talked about money or we talked about finances. My parents came from Mexico when they were very young, and when they achieved some sort of success, by the time I came around, they wanted to spoil me and my little sister. They didn't want us to have any wants. They wanted us to have everything we needed and a lot of things that we didn't need as well. And so it was a very different upbringing even than my older siblings. My older siblings eventually got their stuff together. They have families and homes, and their finances are in pretty good order, even if it took a while to get there. But I just turned 34 and my credit is in the shitter, and I can't, even if I had the money to, I couldn't get an apartment on my own. And I want to fix that because I'm turning 35 next year, and that to me seems like a big number. I had a therapist a few years ago that I created a goal with to be financially sufficient by the time I was 35, and so I gotta get cracking on that, you know. And the first thing I think is to look back at all my biggest financial mistakes. And this was a scary thing, looking inward and being like, oh, I did that totally wrong, I should have done that completely differently. But how else do you learn, right? So it's on Medium. I'll link it in the box below, but I'll also talk about it here because not everybody's a reader, right? So just diving right into it. The very first mistake is not entirely my fault, but it's not getting my mental health checked at an early age. And this is something that I don't blame on anybody. I don't blame my parents. I grew up in the 90s, primarily in the early 2000s, and we didn't do that. We didn't have mental health discussions. You only went to a shrink if you were crazy or white. My parents thought that white people went to therapists, but not us Mexicans, which, you know, that's still something that goes on today. I work in a mental health clinic for children, and a lot of the parents are like, oh, my kids don't need that, this is made up and this is not real and whatever. It's a stigma, and also it's affordability. Now Medi-Cal, as far as I'm aware, I'm in California, so we have Medi-Cal, covers it. We're a Medi-Cal clinic, so I know that it does. And but I always had private insurance, and it always seemed too expensive and something that was not for me or people like me. And so I didn't get my mental health checked. And it turns out I had anxiety and depression from a very young age, and one of the things that I used to try and self-medicate was shopping. And I would buy things because it would make me happy in the moment, and the happiness was not long-term, as anybody with shopping issues knows. And so it was a vicious cycle, and I got myself into a lot of trouble. And it wasn't until I was in my mid-20s that I actually went and got help. And I have that story. I've talked about that before on this channel. I also have another article on Medium talking about that a little bit, so you can check those out if you want to. I'll put the link to the other video somewhere in the end card probably. And so I think if I had gotten it checked sooner, I would have gotten help sooner, medication or therapy or whatever, and I would not have wound up in a lot of these situations. So that's the number one thing for me, is getting my mental health checked. Or I guess not getting my mental health checked really contributed to a lot of major financial catastrophes. And so the second one that I wrote down is getting a credit card at age 19. So when I was in college, the first time, I hit a very terrible depression. I was in a private school on a hill, on a mountain, really, over by UCLA. And I didn't drive until I turned 19. And then, like, right after I got my license, I broke my ankle on my right foot. And so I couldn't drive for a long time. I was in a huge cast. Was supposed to be for 3 months, wound up needing surgery. It turned out to be 6 months. And so I was very isolated. I stopped going to class because it's too difficult to get down the mountain. There's a lot of walking. It wasn't very accessible for people with disabilities or injuries. And so I dropped out. And when I dropped out, I was like, I'm gonna get a job. I'm going to be financially independent. I'm not gonna let my parents help me, aside from, you know, giving me a place to live. And that did not happen because, again, I was in a deep depression. And so I didn't want to ask my parents for money. And what I did was get a credit card, because there are a lot of credit card companies that prey on college students because they know that you are out on your own for the first time, and also that you don't know anything. And so I got one of these, you know, credit cards aimed at students, and it was an unmitigated disaster. I didn't have a job, and I was too depressed and anxious to go out and get a job. And so I had trouble making even the minimum payments. And let me further add to this that I knew nothing about credit cards. I thought it was free money. I understand that at some point you would have to repay it, but I didn't really understand credit utilization. I didn't understand minimum payments. I didn't understand balances and interest or any of that. I just did it on impulse, as I do many things, and I don't recommend it. So now that I'm learning a lot about it, I realize that I am not a person who, at least at this point, should have credit cards. And there are a lot of people who can game the system, and they learn how to use them responsibly and to get rewards and all of that, and that's great. If that's you, do your thing. That is not me. That is not something that I am able to do. So I haven't had credit cards in a long time, but this first one was a doozy. I couldn't pay for it. I got too anxious. I started to ignore it, and then years later it came back and bit me in the ass when I was back in college, and my mom helped me out of that situation. And again, not teaching me about personal responsibility and personal finance, just like, I will do this for you. And so that was another big, huge mistake on my part. I have since learned, but it was not easy. That was not, after I got out of after I got out of the debt, I went back and got more credit cards, store cards, to try and rebuild my credit in my brain, but like, it was another disaster. Anyway, I haven't had any for a few years. I'm gonna keep it that way. My third item on my list is college. College can be a great thing. I was not ready for college. I was reading and writing at a college level by the time I was 12. I was a smart kid. I was labeled gifted and talented, although that is kind of meaningless. I feel like everybody gets put in the gifted program. But it was assumed I would go to college. Everybody always told me I would go to college. And I wanted to. I liked learning, but I was a piss poor high school student. I was too anxious. And again, that's the number one thing, the mental health stuff. I was too anxious. I was too depressed. I didn't know how to manage. And I was thrown into these situations that I was not ready for. And on top of that, I'm like emotionally immature. I'm 34 going on like 15 still to this day. And so I wasn't ready for college. And I asked my mom, you know, it was very difficult at that time for me to stand up for myself or to speak up for myself. And it still kind of is, but not as bad as it used to be. And so I remember standing at the foot of my mom's bed and saying like, hey, can I go to a community college or a junior college? And she said, no, that's for stupid people. And I tried arguing with her. I said, no, it's not. She's like, and her entire thing was, you're too smart to go to a community college. And again, there's a stigma there, especially back then, you know, 20 years ago almost. Oh my God, I'm old. Almost 20 years ago, there was a stigma about junior colleges and community colleges. She doesn't remember saying this, and I remember because it was terrifying for me. But a couple of years ago, she's like, why didn't you just go to a community college first? Mother, you told me I couldn't. So I couldn't get into a lot of the UCs. I got into like Cal State Long Beach, and then I got into this private school that I wound up going to. But I chose it because they used to film a lot of TV shows there and movies. So when I was going there, they were filming like the OC. They filmed some Gilmore Girls there. I think AFI did a music video there. I know in the past, like Adam Sandler movies, and I think an episode of Monk. And so I was really drawn to the Hollywood vibe of it. And it was completely the wrong decision for me. I incurred a lot of debt. My mom incurred a lot of debt because she was doing Parent Plus loans. And then I wound up dropping out. And then I went back a couple of years later after I was feeling better, and I went to a for-profit college. I didn't have anybody guiding me through any of this. And so I was kind of just making decisions on a whim, on a flight of fancy. And so while I feel like I learned a lot at my second college, and I definitely feel like I learned a lot about screenwriting, which was what I wanted to do and what I'm still trying to do, it was absolutely not a good choice, you know? I could have gotten that education somewhere else, or I could have gone straight into doing PA work or learning that way. I don't know. I could have picked another path, but I didn't. And so now I'm saddled with all this debt, and it's not gotten me any further. So yeah, college, I should have waited a little longer. I should have done a community college. I didn't know. I didn't know. Now I know, but now it's too late. So that was, wow. I'm really uncomfortable talking about this. I feel like I'm laying my soul bare about all of my stupidity in the past. It was just ignorance. I didn't know. I come from a family that is not from the United States. We didn't have a history of going to college. My oldest sister went to college and law school, and she was very smart about it, but she wasn't there for me to talk to about these things. And I never had like a super close relationship with her, so I didn't have that person to like bounce ideas off of. The only advice she gave me was like, don't go to Chapman and don't go to University of Redlands. That was the extent of my college guidance. And so anyway, moving on to number 4, I sold life insurance. There was a period after I came back from college where I was interning at a music video production company, and I interned on the documentary Fatitude, and then there was a little crisis in my family, and so I needed to find a job, like a 9-to-5. And so I started working at Target, and then nothing. Like, oh, that's not true. That's not the truth. I was working at what is it called? I was working at a call center, and then I was like, this is not fulfilling to me. So I found a job working at a photography studio, and it turns out that they overestimated how much help they needed. So after like a week, they just stopped calling. They didn't even have the decency to be like, hey, we don't need you anymore. They just stopped calling. And so I knew I could not go back to that insurance agency. It was so toxic that I couldn't do it. And so I was looking for jobs and looking for jobs and looking for jobs and looking for jobs, and I could not find jobs. And so on one of these interviews, it was like a group interview, I went to a place for they were selling life insurance, but it was a total bait and switch because I went for a secretary or front office receptionist position, and I got sucked in. They pitch it in a marvelous way, and the boss came in and was talking about how she makes millions of dollars every year in passive income. I don't know if that's still the case, but I was like, yeah, this sounds easy, I can do this. And so I went and got my license. I am licensed to sell life insurance in the state of California. And I tried it for like a month and it was horrible. They gave me leads, so it wasn't like I was trying to sell to my own family, which a lot of places make you do. But the leads that I got were really poor union workers, and because I speak Spanish, they gave me all the Spanish speaking workers. And I just felt bad. These people could barely afford what they were living, and I was trying to sell them on this added expense. And I felt really dirty. And they kept trying to, at the office, they kept trying to frame it as, you know, you're helping them because down the line, you know, they will benefit from this. And I'm like, I can't in good conscience try and give them more stuff to pay for when they can barely make a living now and they're living paycheck to paycheck. Like, it felt disgusting. And I worked primarily with white people who did not understand immigrant culture or any of that stuff, and so it was hard. Also, I'm not pushy. I have a conscience and I'm not pushy. Sales was not for me. Not to say that everybody who does sales doesn't have a conscience or what have you, but it just was not, I'm not the right personality type to go into sales. I couldn't do it. And then my grandma died. And I found out I was bipolar right at the same time. And so I went in there sobbing one day and I said, I quit. And they said, no. And I said, yes, I quit. And so it was a huge scam. I got an email about a year ago saying that this particular company is being sued in a class action lawsuit because they were billing you as an independent contractor, but for all intents and purposes you were a full-time employee, and they were not abiding by labor laws and not giving lunch breaks. And there were days where I would go out with my supervisor when I was in training, and she would get food for herself and not even ask me if I want any. I wasn't asking her to buy it for me, just like not even saying, hey, I'm going to this place to pick up lunch, do you want to order something as well? And so I would sit there and like watch her eat and be like, what am I supposed to do? We're in the middle of nowhere in the Inland Empire and there's no other place close by. And so it was a really bad experience, and I'm reminded of it constantly because it turns out that the place that I'm working now is right in the area where we were given all of our leads. And so I drive by these places like every day. Actually, just the other day I was driving back from the store and I came across one of the apartment buildings where I saw this couple have a huge fight right in front of me. And so it was pretty horrible. Just thinking about it makes me very uncomfortable, and trying to self-soothe by like touching myself, not in a dirty way, don't go there, but it just like, I cringe. It's awful, and that was a huge mistake, and it set me back another few months because instead of looking actively for a job, I was involved in all this mess. And so don't do that. Don't do that. If it sounds too good to be true, it is. And so that was horrible. And then the last thing that I wrote in my little list here is just staying ignorant for too long. When I was in high school, I didn't want to get a job because I was like, I'm young, I'm going to enjoy my youth. And that just continued for far too long with me shirking responsibility. And again, a lot of that was my anxiety and my depression. I didn't know how to enter the workforce. I didn't know what I was doing. I was scared. And I didn't want to be put in that position. And my mom made it really easy by giving me money. And my dad made it a little less easy, but still like didn't teach me, you know? And so I just didn't want to learn. I was in my own little bubble of, you know, my mom's giving me money, so I'm just gonna go and have fun and not have any responsibilities. And I'm ashamed, but that's just the way it went. That's how it was for me. That's how, you know, far too long. And so it didn't work out, and now I'm paying the consequences because I'm 34 and I'm saddled with debt and trying to pay stuff off, and it's it's very uncomfortable, but I'm a firm believer that it's not too late to get a handle on everything that's going on in my life, all my finances. And so I'm learning and I'm committed. And moving forward, I'm hoping to make better choices. And I think getting a hold of my mental health really helped. Really helped, because I can see myself for who I am instead of hiding, you know? So I think part of it will be going back into therapy so I can continue to work on my issues that are holding me back. But right now I'm on medical leave, and I've been dealing with all of that for a couple of months. So I don't even know if my insurance is, I think my insurance, there's a problem with it right now. So I have to call this week and make sure that's all in order before I go back next week. I'm hoping to go back next week. That is the end of my disability, the end of my FMLA. I mean, I still have more FMLA time, but my doctor gave me a note until next week, and I'm trying to go back. I feel better. I don't feel perfect. I never feel perfect. I'm always sick in some way, shape, or form. But yeah, I'm gonna go back in and be smarter about putting stuff in savings and building an emergency fund, because it's been really difficult these past couple of months with my disability not coming in and struggling to do anything. So gonna try and be smarter about my finances and hope that works out. So thanks for watching. If you want to hear more about this, or more about my path towards financial independence and all of that jazz, let me know. I have more things to write about and more things to talk about. So if that's something you're interested in, let me know. I'll do more videos in the series. Otherwise, give it a like if you learned anything, or if you sympathize with anything that I went through, or if you're going through the same thing right now. And I am gonna try and be more consistent with these videos now that I'm feeling a little bit better. So maybe see you soon.